වෙසෙස්සු මහා සංස්කෘතික මංගල්‍යයක උත්කර්ෂය ඓතිහාසික කන්ද උඩරට ඇසළ පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යය පළමු රන්දෝලි පෙරහර අද දිනේ විවිධ සංචාර කිරීමට නියමිතයි. මල්වතු අස්කිරි උභය මහා විහාරීය මහානායක මාහිම්පාණන් වහන්සේලාගේ අවවාද අනුශාසනා පෙරදැරිව ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගාවේ ගරු දේවර් නිලමේතුමන් සිව් මහා දේවාලයන්හි බස්නායක නිලමේතුමන්ලාගේ සංවිධාන ශක්තියෙන් මෙම පෙරහැර මංගල්‍ය සංවිධානය වෙනවා. අද දිනේ මේ පෙරහැර මංගල්‍ය නැරඹීම සඳහා මහජනතාවට ඉඩ ප්‍රස්තාවක් නොලැබෙන නිසාවෙන් අප රූපවාහිනී මාධ්‍ය ඔස්සේ සහ ශ්‍රී දළදා මාලිගාවේ නිල සමාජ මාධ්‍ය ජාල ඔස්සේ මේ පෙරහැර මංගල්‍ය විසිතුර ඔබට තිළින කරනවා. අද දිනේ පෙරහැර කරුණු වහන්සේ වැඩම කරවන්නේ වාසනා හස්තිරාජා විසින්. ඒ නිසාවෙන් අපි ඔබට ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනා කරනවා ඓතිහාසික කන්ද උඩරට ඇසළ පෙරහැර මහා මංගල්‍යයේ පළමු රන්දෝලි පෙරහැරේ විසිතුර අත්විඳින්නට.
Special live broadcast of the first Randoli Perahera brought to you by the Media Bureau of Maligava.
And you're now seeing the Perahera officials obtaining the permission and blessings of the Devadana Nilame, the lay custodian of the sacred tooth relic, before commencing their street perambulations.
And these are the 10 Vidanes of the villagers under the Senkadakala king, clad in their official costumes.
And now we see the pictures of the handing over of keys by the Devadana Nilame to the officiating bhikkhus.
As we can see, the Devadana Nilame walks under much protection together with the 10 Vidanes, seconded to the service of the king.
Making his way from the upper to the lower level of the temple of the tooth relic, Devadana Nilame ceremoniously and reverentially takes the relic's casket under the protection of the chief incumbent of the Mallatu Mahavihara, Venerable Tibbatuave Sri Medankara Nayaka Thera, to the royal casket.
As you can see, the relic casket is being heralded on red pavada, also meaning carpet, under much veneration and protection. Now this is a devout moment where the Perahera casket, which contains 32 relics of Lord Buddha, will be placed in the Ranhilige, mounted on the lavishly costumed Tusker, who will add color and glamour to this first Randoli Perahera.
Yes, Rajiv, and it is to be mentioned that it is not the sacred Dalada tooth relic which is being taken in this procession. As you mentioned, it is a special casket which also bears 32 relics of Lord Buddha, and that is called the Perahera casket. And instead of the Dalada tooth relic, we see the sacred relics being taken by this majestic Tusker in the Perahera.
Indeed, and now we see the devout moment where the Tusker makes his way from Mahavahakada, meaning main entrance, to the Sandagala, meaning the moonstone, in preparation to parade the streets of this city. With the hope that the Kandy Esala Perahera will bless the people of this country, the whole world and the whole universe are witnessing this blessed and devout moment where now the Tusker steps onto the Sandagala on this first Randoli Perahera.
And the royal Tusker in the first Randoli Perahera for 2021 is none other than Vasana, belonging to the Ruhunu Maha Katharagama Devalaya.
And we are broadcasting the first Randoli Perahera live from the ancient Mahamalua of Sri Dallanda Maligava.
Walking up front with the sound of whips piercing through the skies are the whip crackers. The annual Perahera, which is held in the month of Esala, is believed to trigger the monsoon. Therefore, these whip crackers symbolically present the upcoming rain, and they symbolically present the thunder which precedes the rain.
Indeed, the Perahera being a ceremony of offering on behalf of Lord Buddha, the cracking of whips also indicates, in addition to what Sachini just mentioned, it indicates the way for the passing Perahera. It indicates the clearing of the way for the passing of Perahera. And it also announces that the Perahera is reaching closer.
I hope you could remember, Rajiv, back then, before this whole pandemic thing. There were great numbers of people who threw coins into the paths of the whip masters and these whip crackers as an offering to ward off evil from their children and smooth their life path. But unfortunately, I think last year and this year as well, we can't see people lining up to join the Perahera, to watch the Perahera in these Kandian streets. But still, I think there are people watching us live on television as well as through our live broadcast to see this magnificence as well as the elegance of this grand procession.
Indeed, reminiscing the past Peraheras where people were lined up on either side of the street, as you just mentioned, it was actually a very beautiful tradition that highlights the basis of giving, offering and sharing among the people of our land. And regardless of how rich or poor they are, they used to offer coins with great devotion and joy to the Perahera as their mind are conditioned to giving. And although the whipping of these whips, although the slashing of these whips looks like a simple task, it is actually not. It takes a great amount of skill and practice to transfer all that momentum and energy to the 7 feet long whip as they create this sound that resembles thunder. And as you can see, as they slash their whips onto the ground, the ends of these whips come undone. And these whips, which are made of fiber, have to be constantly knotted and tied again as they move along this procession.
Just take a moment. Take a moment and listen to the sound they produce. Yes. And if you listen carefully, you may understand very well the symbolic representation of this whole process of whip cracking. The sound produced by these whip crackers, as we mentioned earlier as well, is equivalent to the sound of lightning strikes. And the reason for having such a task at a Perahera like this is set to pay homage to rain gods, requesting to bless our crops and cultivations with rain.
Having said so, rain does not come with the sunder of thunder alone. Just as lightning flashes across the skies, the procession too has its flashes of light. And this is the offering of fire, inviting the rain gods to water our land with rain.
Exactly, Rajiv. The lightning which comes with the rains is a phenomenon of nature which is magnificently depicted by these fire dancers.
is amazing how symbolic these events in the Dalanda procession closely signifies and resembles nature. The fire thrown up descends down with great velocity, just how lightning strikes or hits the ground.
These fire dances have their traditional forms as well, to remind of their initiator or their leader in this year is E.D. Tilakaratna.
Speaking of symbolism, the sun, moon, earth, universe, solar month, night and day, these are all cyclic. And these fire dances, as you can see, resemble and highlight these universal cycles. It shows and makes us realize how in our life cycles we are burned and cooled.
The fireballs of these dances are wielded in rotational forms, painting the night with varied patterns of light, thus illuminating the entire procession.
Fire, this natural element, is in fact a very precious and closely connected element in our day-to-day lives. These dancers are very mindful of the part of fire in cooking, protecting crops and hyenas back in the days, and also dispelling darkness. And these dancers tame this fire and give it as a Dalanda offering, while they create curiosity, satisfaction, and amazement on the onlookers.
Rajiv, I think the true import of these dances can be seen when a large group of them performs, simultaneously merging their various fiery elements into an amazing display of light and heat. The tradition is usually handed down from generation to generation, with individuals of all ages, from the very young to the very old, taking part in the display of this kingly heritage of their clans.
Indeed, this is in fact a very dangerous act of fire play. However, the dedication, skill, and the veneration they have for Lord Buddha is quite clearly showcased when you look at how they confidently wield these fires and tame this fire and paint a picture in this Kandian kingdom, lighting up the skies.
If we attempt at attributing another meaning for this entire performance, we could say that the fiery cycle of samsara, which is flooded with desire, ignorance and anger, is highlighted by the chakras painted by these wonderful fire dancers.
We see these iron wheels of fire being wielded horizontally, vertically, on lower planes, on upper planes, on middle planes, and as rightly mentioned, all these together creates a beautiful picture right at the start of this first Randoli Perahera.
As the fireball dancers leave our sight, we see the Buddhist flag bearers led by the national flag.
And this national flag symbolizes that although this is primarily a Buddhist festival, it showers blessings, prayers and peace to the whole island nation of Sri Lanka.
And these are the representatives from Chandrananda Buddhist College, Kandy. Talking about the Buddhist flag, it was jointly designed by Mr. J.R.D. Silva and Colonel Henry Steele Alcott to mark the revival of Buddhism in Ceylon. It is accepted as the international Buddhist flag. And this ceremonious procession is performed in adulation of the living Buddha as well as a paramita for the future Buddha.
And following the Buddhist flag bearers, we see the cloth flag bearers, who are also known as the provincial flag bearers. And this is an addition to the Randoli Perahera. This is not an event we witnessed at the previously held Kumbal Peraheras.
These representatives are also from Chandrananda Buddhist College, Kandy.
And as mentioned before, this traditional display of provincial flags remind us of the glory and the sovereignty of the times of the Senkadagala king. And yet another addition to the Randoli Perahera, we see the metal standard bearers, also known as the brass Disa flags.
The brass Disa flags also represent the glory of Senkadagala. Both gold and brass workers belong to the same clan or Gurukulaya are here. And they are the ones who make the gold ornaments for the pageant as well as the gold and silver work for the king previously during the times of the kings.
Indeed, and they give us a sense of pride to be part of a nation rich in culture and immaculate artistry.
With the durability of the brass flag, the kings of old offered their hope of similar durability and sustainability to the nation. And also, these flags reflect the artistry levels in their detailed engravings.
This artistry dates back to centuries back. Goldsmiths, silversmiths and brassmiths belong to the same clan or the Gurukulaya, which is known as the Navandana clan. And as you can see, they make beautiful ornaments with detailed engravings and sometimes embedded with precious gems to adorn the sacred tooth relic and the king.
What we see now are the sword carriers. These sword bearers symbolize the protection given to the Perahera.
Those who know the history of the temple of Tooth Relic would be proud of our history and the heroes who protected the sacred Truth Relic at all times. The sacred Dalanda Tooth Relic has been a symbol of kingship in the country from the day it was brought to the nation. And therefore, there were many wars that were fought for its possession. The history of these clashes spans thousands of years, from the Anuradhapura era all the way to the Senkadagala era. And the sacred Tooth Relic was protected by the might of the sword-wielding warriors, who are represented by these sword bearers.
Exactly, Rajiv. It is for this reason that in calm, collected, disciplined procession like this, these men join The procession providing protection to the Perahera casket.
And interestingly, Sachini, in ancient times, the history books tell us that this platoon of sword bearers who took the streets in the Perahera were actually the royal army at the time. So I believe these sword bearers carry much pride.
And now appears the first tusker. Positioned atop, swaying with its rolling gait, sits a white-clad chieftain who is the Perahera.
And the tusker who is leading the procession today is the celebrated Sri Lankan tusker Nedunga Raja, who belongs to Dr. Harsha Dharmavijaya of Veliveria.
The duty of the Perahera leading the elephant procession is to inform the citizens of the country that the procession is being carried out in accordance with the directives of the scroll.
And this very unique sound that you hear is from none other than the first hay visit troop. The Heavy players representing the traditional orchestra of Sinhala music known as the Panchaturre Nada, played by the Panchaturre Banda, meaning fivefold musical instruments. And here we see 4 out of the 5 Panchaturre Banda represented. And as you can see, marching in the front are the drummers from the 4 main lineage families, namely Ihalabala, Molagoda, Uduela and Malagammana.
Until the Hevisi drum beaters, who are permanently seconded to the service of the Dalada Maligawa, arrive in procession, no Panchaturre Vadana or making of sound using either drums or musical instruments is permitted. And this is the official Hevisi beaters of Sri Dalada Maligawa. Next we have another fabulous tusker, and on the mount of this tusker we see the Gajanayaka Nilame. The Gajanayaka Nilame arrives as the royal official in charge Nilesh of the king's troop of elephants, and it is a position given him directly by the king himself. And now you can mention this fabulous tusker who carries the Gajanayaka Nilame on his top.
We all missed his appearance during the first 5 Kumbal Perahera occasions, but today from the first Randoli procession, we are lucky to see the tusker Kotte Raja, who belongs to Venerable Alutnuwara Anuruddha Nayaka Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Kotte Rajamahaviharaya.
And the Gajanayaka Nilame is seen in the procession on the back of this majestic tusker Kotte Raja, carrying the elephant god or the gold Ankusa, the emblem of his office.
Kotte Raja is in fact a tusker of Burmese origin who was gifted to Sri Lanka in the year 2009 and is a continuous participant of the Sri Dalada Perahera in Kandy.
And the present Gajanayaka Nilame of Sri Dalada Maligawa is Mr. Palitha Jayawardena.
We see the majesty of this tusker being reflected in the Gajanayaka Nilame itself, if you take a look. The sheaf of beetle or bulat plays a huge part in our Sri Lankan culture. And this is a troupe of beetle dancers known as Bulat Padaya in Sinhalese.
And this group today is led by Nalin Jayasekara. And in the times of the kings, it was difficult to invite each and every citizen of the country to be a part of this devotional event and to weave the procession to their heart's content. Therefore, the beetle dancers symbolically invite all the people of the land to obtain merit by watching the procession.
Indeed, the sheaves of beetle they carry, which consists of 40 beetles, invites everyone in Sri Lanka and around the world to witness this first Randoli Perahera from the convenience of your home, which is telecasted live on YouTube, on the Facebook page of the Sri Dalanda Maligawa, and on television.
And now we see the third tusker in the first Randoli Perahera. And he is none other than the leader of the Sri Dalada Maligawa stables, who is Indiraja. And on the mount of Indiraja, we see an official carrying a Buddhist flag. And this is done to prove that this is truly a Buddhist procession.
And this is a troupe of Chamara dancers. The Chamara dancers perform as a token of honor to the Perahera casket. And these instruments, or the Chamara, they are made of yak tails. And they produce a slight breeze which gives a very pleasant feeling.
Since the Buddhists consider the Perahera casket as the living Buddha walking along the streets of the city, in this procession, it is with great devotion that the Chamara dancers, Chamara fan dancers, stylize their fanning in ordered columns.
And as we see the majestic elephant take the streets amongst the Chamara dancers, this reminds me of the classical poetry of the Kotte period. It is mentioned that white tassels in motion and majestic elephants are considered auspicious signs. It is illustrated as such in the Salalihini Sandesha, a classical poem by Totagamu Rahulathero.
And this group of fan dancers or Chamara dancers today is led by Nimesh Sumanaratna of Chandrananda Buddhist College.
These Chamara fans were a regular feature. It was a regular sight in the past in the royal courts, where they fanned the kings and the queens with much respect and veneration. And these dancers provide the same comforts and respect to the sacred tooth relic that parades this city.
The gentle breeze generated by the charmer of fans is the softest, and it denotes also in the minds of the people the rise and fall of thoughts in our mind.
And followed by these charmer dancers, we see Banda, who belongs to the Honorable Devadana Nilame Pradeep Nilangadala. And on Banda's mount, we see an official carrying a brass canopy to symbolize protection to the approaching tooth relic casket.
I think this is the group of Udaki players coloring and in color to the first Randoli Perahera today. The Udakia is a hand drum and it holds a special place in the Dalada celebrations. It is also played in the daily rituals of the sacred tooth relic.
Indeed, one can also see the traditional clan heritage of these players as they join the procession of Dalada parading through the streets of the city. And as you can see, they are clad in traditional attire where they have ornaments made with pearls on their breast, bangles, anklets, and many other ornaments, painting a beautiful picture as they play this Udakia while dancing.
Of course, Rajiv, the dance of the Udaki players, if we notice it, is relatively simple, but it bears a great significance as it is used as the tool that provides the steady beat or note to the Kavikara Madhua or chanting group when performing the Dalada rituals.
And followed by these Udaki performers, we see two of the most gentle elephants in today's first Randoli procession. On one side, we see Punchi Banda belonging to Mr. Kitsirimevan Velagedara of Panaliya, alongside with Gajuba, who belongs to Mr. Ranjit Vijay of Yakkala.
And this again symbolizes the close connection we have with our neighboring countries. And now we see a group of Thammatam players, a very unique sound, different to other types of drums.
Now we see a beautiful performance by the leader of this group, Suchittananda.
The Thammattama plays a predominant role in Buddhist festivals. There are 5 types of instruments in classical Sinhala orchestra: Atata, Vitata, Vitatata, Ganaya and Sushreya. And this Thammattama falls into the classification of Vitata as they are being played with sticks which are rounded at the end.
The thumb that penetrates the profession with its distinctive sound gives Dalada heritage the foundation of its pride and its honor.
Yet another gentle participant in today's procession, and this is Raja belonging to Mrs. Sita Senanayaka Mallava of Hettimulla in Kegol.
And one of the most awaited events in the Dalada procession, the Rabang dancers or the Rabang spinners showcasing their talent and skill as they turn these Rabang or tambourines, displaying varied patterns of skill and acrobatics.
In fact, Rajiv, this spinning rabana or the tambourine can be taken as a symbol for impermanence too, I guess, because it reminds us that we may lose our life in an instant, in the same way that the rabana breaks free from the rod or the stick on which it is spinning.
Indeed, as rightly said, all these events have so much of significance and resemblance to different elements. And it is actually amazing, and we are blessed to witness this every year. These undying cultures should indeed be preserved for years to come. And again, we should be thankful for all these dancers, these skilled artists, for bringing or for continuing all these skills and traditions since the ancient times.
And a great skill is required to manipulate this instrument well.
Having said so, this is in fact a sport, and it is referred as Raban Kridava in Sinhala literature. And as we see, it involves skills of spinning and balancing the tambourine on fingers and also on the tip of long flexible sticks.
And this group of skilled tambourine spinners is led by Aryapala Vijayaman.
The elephant we see in front of us, belonging to Venerable Kanangama Narada Thero, the chief incumbent of the Kaduwela Sankapitti Vihara, is named Kandula Veera. In fact, Kandula was an elephant who served the Sri Lanka army as Kandula IV of the Sri Lanka Gajaba regiment, and today he takes part in the Kandy Esala Perahera.
And now one of the most important traditional Kandian dance forms, the Nayandi dancing troupe. Nayandi is in fact the name of their costume, and these dancers perform this dance during the initial preparations of the Kohumba Kankaria festival, during the lighting of the lamps and the preparation of foods for the demons.
And this group is led by Samant Nilvita.
The dancer wears a white cloth and a white turban, and beadwork decorations on their chests, a waistband, rows of beads around their necks, silver chains, brass shoulder plates, anklets, and many other accessories. And basically, in summary, this consists of the lower part of the vest costume, yet omits the elaborate headgear, which is a crowning piece of the entire outfit.
This is also a dance form of the Kandian tradition. I think this is a good instance for us to see the clan heritage, which has passed down from generation to generation, as we see dancers or performers of different age groups in this performance.
And now we see one of the youngest participants in the Dalada Perahera procession today. And this tusker is Sindhu, who belongs to the most venerable Mahanayaka Thero of the Malbatta chapter, Venerable Tibbatuave Sri Siddhartha Sumangala Thero.
We see these Nayandi dancers perform very serene and slow movements as means of showing respect to the sacred casket that travels this city.
Even though Sindhu is one of the youngest participants in this year's Perahera, we saw him taking major roles in the Kumbal Perahera processions which we witnessed.
And this has also been one of the most prominent performances in the Perahera for the last few days as well. This is a mixed folk dance. Rajiv?
Apart from the classical dance forms, there are folk dancers as well. And this is in fact a modern concept of mixing many folk dancers into one group. As we can see, this mixed folk dancing group, led by a group of Gatabera drummers, Tammatam players, perform their art using tambourines, castanets, likeli, and savarang as well. These dances were originated and are associated with folk activities and festivals back in the days. There are very striking features for folk dancers. The colorfulness, the joyfulness, the energy and the speed are characteristic of these folk dancers.
And these vibrant folk dancers are trained by PCB Vijay Surya.
Compared to the white plaided elephants we saw in the Kumbal Perahera processions, now we see a change in the costume of these elephants. And this elephant in front of us is Madhu, who belongs to Venerable Murundeniya Dhammaratana Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Mutiyangana Rajamaha Vihara in Badulla.
And this is a group of Panteru dancers clad in their traditional and original attire. And that is in fact a feature of these Panteru players, where in the entire procession they wear their original attire. And in other processions across the island, these Panteru dancers are attired in various different costumes, styles and ways.
Adding to that, the Pantero tambourines without the skin bring the purity of the Dalada procession into the minds of the people as they step across the promenade. The sound of the Pantero too is synonymous with the Kandy Esala Perahera tradition.
And Sachin, is something else we hear in addition to the sound of the Pantheru are the unique chants of these Pantheru dancers. And these rituals, these songs are from rituals from Suvisi Vivarana and Sat Satya, which are traditional Pantheru dance rituals.
We can see these dancers carrying Panteru in one hand while using the other hand for their dancing movements. It is actually a fabulous sight to see.
It is only in the hill capital, Kandy, that we are able to witness this Pantheru dance in its most authentic and purest forms. And did you know, Sachini, that these Pantheru dancers performed these acts or the Pantheru dance during ancient times to celebrate victories in the battlefield?
Yes, Rajiv, I think there's a lot to learn when it comes to a Perahera like this, and also it is to be noted that this instrument is regular to the Kavikara Madhuva or chanting groups of the procession. The ring is a circlet of light brass. And now we see another two tuskers adding color, adding glamour to this first Randoli Perahera.
Indeed, Sachini, the approach of two tuskers simply signifies that the Perahera casket is approaching. And these two tuskers who are carrying officials with Burmese flags are Singharaja and Burumaraja, who belongs to the stable of the Sri Dalada Maligawa.
This again symbolizes the impact and the close connection Sri Lanka had with Burma. And these flags add to the diversity, the already existing diversity of this Esala procession.
Both Singharaja and Burumaraja have been very useful tuskers to the Sri Dalada Perahera in their roles of playing accompanying tuskers to the royal tusker.
And this is yet another prominent performances in the entire procession. This is the first troupe of West dancers that we see in the Dalada procession. In fact, the first Randoli Perahera today, led by Ishanta Ihalavela and Lasantha Vansekara.
Indeed, one of the most unique and most recognized dancing forms in the Sri Lankan artistry. The West dance is more than just a ritual. It is a sacred recitation for protection against misfortune. And therefore, this elaborate costume they wear is also considered sacred.
could be said that the Kandian dancer's skill and dance form have been brought to the national consciousness by the Dalada Perahera alone. In ancient times, these dancers obtained a royal boon after having donned their Vestatua and danced for the king of Pandavasnuvara to dispel unseen inimical forces that threatened his life.
Indeed, in fact, the roots of this dance art lies in the ancient village ritual known as the Kohumba Kankarya, and this is an important folk ritual of the Kandian kingdom. There is something insanely thrilling in the movements of these West dancers. And right now, as you can see, they perform calm and composed salutary gestures using their hands. For that is a way of showing respect and veneration to the sacred Dalanda Tooth relic.
And they consider it a great opportunity to perform right in front of the sacred relic casket. And now we see the Karya Korale, who is the second in command of the Devadana Nilame, and it is a heritage position given by royal decree. And the Karya Korale, dressed in royal white, is the foremost observer of the Dalada Perahera.
Karya Koral observes whether or not the complex and unique rituals and devotions associated with the Dalanda procession are conducted in accordance to its decrees and orders that have been previously laid down.
Amidst the Nagasingham players, we see the most awaited moment of the entire procession. The ceremonial tusker, lavishly adorned in golden costumes, walking majestically, carrying the sacred casket, accompanied by the tusker groom. And this tusker, who is fortunate to carry the sacred casket today, is the tusker Vasana.
Vasana is a tusker belonging to the historic Ruhunu Maha Katharagama Devalaya, and today Vasana is accompanied by Miyan Raja belonging to the Sri Dalada Maligava stables, alongside with Kandula belonging to Venerable Kollupitiye Mahinda Sangarakita Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Kalaniya Rajamahaviharaya.
And we now see the chamber of versifiers of Sri Dalada Maligava chanting hymns in praise of Lord Buddha as well as the sacred Dalada Tooth relic.
Indeed, and we see them with a silver udakya, a silver pantheru, and a silver castanet, which are instruments donated to them by the king at the time.
And we see officials carrying flowers as well as lamps, oil lamps, in veneration to the sacred relic. I think the first Randoli today is a very important as well as a very unique Perahera procession, because so many elements that we didn't saw in the previous Kumbal Peraheras, Kumbal processions, can be seen in today's first Randoli.
Indeed, a lot of symbolism we see here. And adding to what you just said, flowers are something that Buddhists offer to Lord Buddha on a daily basis. And this shows the close connection. And I'm sure many of our viewers who are witnessing this first Randoli procession can actually relate and understand the symbolism, the purity, the veneration, and the respect that these dancers and these artists carry on their shoulders as they take part in this first Randoli procession.
Up next, we are about to see the second group of West dancers in the Dalada procession today. And this troupe is led by Sanjeeva Verapitiya and Peter Surasena.
The glamorous costume symbolically represents the regalia of the Malay king. The royal brothers who performed the ancient ritual Hatapas Mangalya 2500 years ago. This reflects the culture and heritage that this procession, this Dalada procession contains and entails. And this is the Naruma Trava performed by these West dancers, a style that was introduced to the Kandy and dancing by the great Guru Nitta Velugunaya. He was once our nation's most renowned traditional dancers back in 1940s and 1950s.
As we mentioned earlier as well, a West dancer considers it a great honor to perform in front of the sacred relic casket as well as the Honorable Devadaninilame. I think these clans, these hereditary clans are fortunate enough to perform that task in today's Randoli Perahera as well.
Indeed, and that great honor comes with much practice, dedication and skill. For these West dancers, with this iconic headgear, is symbolic of the highest epitome a dancer can achieve in the Kandian dancing heritage.
It's truly an eye-catching sight to see how these elders, seniors from these clans perform together with their juniors who are about to take their clan heritage to the future as well.
The two Paramparas leading these dancers are the Verapitiya and Surasena Paramparas, who have been in long association with the Kandy Perahera, and they are the Grand Masters of the Kohubakan Karya. The dancers singing and dancing the Gajaga Vannama as they pave the way for the Devadaninilame, performing salutary hand gestures known as Vandunmat or Dakunmat.
Thus, they pave the way the second troop of West dancers paves the way for the Devadana Nilame, the lay custodian of the temple of the Tooth Relic. And he is the individual who is tasked with protecting the Dalada with his own life. And the Devadana Nilame, the present Devadana Nilame of Sri Dalada Maligava, is Honorable Pradeep Nilangadala.
This is such an uplifting sight that reminds us of our ancient Kandian glory, where the Devadana Nilame walks before the Vidanes of the 10 villagers who are permanently seconded to the Sengadakala kingdom, and they collectively pay their respect and homage to the sacred Tooth Relic.
When the sacred relic casket is taken in the procession, the Devadana Nilame along with Vidanes walks right behind it with the noble expectation of protecting the Tooth Relic.
And that marks the end of the Dalanda procession, paving the way to the first Devala procession, which is the Natha Devala procession. And here you see the godly ornaments of God Natha being carried under white pavada amidst much veneration and respect to be placed on this majestic tusker.
And now we see the Buddhist flag bearers in the Natha Devale procession, once again reminding us of the fact that this procession is very much significant to us as a Buddhist procession.
The Perahera of the Natha Devala is dedicated to God Natha, who is believed to be the aspiring to attain Buddhahood or Bodhisattva.
And now we see the very first elephant of the Sri Mahanatha Devalaya, who is Vijitaraja, belonging to Venerable Millane Sirialankara Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Dimbulagala Rajamaha Viharaya in Polonnaruwa. And on the mount of Vijitaraja, we see an official carrying the flag of God Natha.
Once again, we see the legacy beaters in the Natha Devale procession, and this tune has echoed through the hills of Sri Lanka for centuries, and here's a chance for us to hear it once again at the beginning of the Natha Devale procession as well.
Indeed, this unique tune of the Havisi troop will be the same throughout the procession and will lead all Devala processions. The decorative tussle in the drums you see leading the Havisi drum troop signifies the Grand Masters who hails from long heritages. Here too we see tam-tam, dowler, castanets, and playing the very unique tune are the horns known as the Buranava, a traditional Kandian instrument. We see these drummers on the forefront of the Natha Devala procession advancing to the sound of the Gaman Havisi, paving the way to yet another elephant clad in yellow.
It is the speciality of the Randoli Perahera processions where we see a Gajanayaka Nilame in the Devala Perahera as well. And this is the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahanatha Devalaya, who is on the mount of the elephant Rohana belonging to Mr. Varuna Kannangara of Horana.
God Natha was yellow in complexion, and this elephant is symbolic of that color, yellow.
And we see a group of Savaran dancers in the Natha Devale procession as well. Once again, this performance is an act of fanning, and perhaps we could say that this performance is done in adoration of God Natha in order to fan the sacred casket which bears the godly ornaments of God Natha in today's Perahera.
In fact, this is the first Savarang dancing troupe we witnessed, and this is very much similar to the Chamara dancing troupe. However, these Savarang dancers, they have the Savarang, which is known to be an instrument which consists of a pole and fans made of fine threads sending cooling breezes in devotion to the Perahera casket. And again, this is an act of devotion to the Daladarulik, where these dancers engage in a controlled and composed dance.
When it comes to the Natha Devale procession, we can say that it is also formed in line with traditional Buddhist worship forms that are more stately and circumspect in their import.
And now we see the third elephant of the Sri Mahanatha Devala Perahera, and we see Arjuna belonging to the historic Vyavurukannala Rajamaha Vihara of Dikwella.
And this is the Thammattam troupe in the Natha Devale procession. While this Perahera is an annual offering to the sacred relic as well as the gods, it could also be mentioned that it is a great platform for all these artists from all around the country to showcase their fabulous talents.
And following these Thammattam dances, we see the mother and the son joining the procession. Here we have Kumari and Bandara, both belonging to Mr. Kamal Kitsiri of Kottava. It has to be noted that births among captive elephants in Sri Lanka are not quite frequent, and the elephant Bandara we see here is one of those rare opportunities.
And these are the Pantheru dancers performing in the Natha Devale procession.
There are traditional families who have handed down this valuable art through the generations. Just to name a few: Urapula, Alapalava, Kadigamuwa, Pahata Hatta, and Verake are a few leading traditional generations who have lived this art to this day. The Pantheru dance is in fact essentially a Buddhist dance form that grew within the surroundings of rich and fertile Buddhist cultured atmosphere. and the simplicity of their costume really allows them to perform the acrobatic movements that you will witness in this procession.
And in this night-long celebration, there's another elephant clad in gleaming yellow.
And this elephant we see in front of us is Lasanda, who belongs to the Upulwan Vishnu Devalaya in Devinura.
And Lasanda leads to the first troop of West dancers in the Natha Devalaya procession.
It has to be noted that this dancing style is only performed by men, and this West dancer had to traditionally don a costume of 64 ornaments, believed to be the replica of the attire worn by the associated deity god Kuhumba.
I think, Rajiv, we see some distinct feature in today's first Randoli Perahera, because previously in all the Kumbal Peraheras that were held, we saw Nayani dancers in the Devalaya Peraheras, but today we see a troop of West dancers.
Indeed, the Randoli Perahera is often always more glamorous, more vibrant, and more beautiful than all the Kumbal Peraheras we have witnessed today. So this is a Perahera you do not want to miss.
I think we are about to witness the most awaited moment in the Natha Devalaya Perahera segment today. And this is the main Tusker group or the elephant group in the Natha Devalaya procession. And the Tusker, who is with two fabulous tusks, is carrying the godly ornaments of God Natha. Nilesh?
And this ceremonial Tusker is Muthuraja, who belongs to the historic Aludgama Kande Vihara. And accompanying Muthuraja, we see his sister colleague Kumari and Rani belonging to Mr. Nalaka Jayasinghe of Godagama.
And this is the second West dancing troupe of the Natha Devalaya procession. These West dancers, they have a very unique technique, different to other dance forms. And this dancing technique is partly derived from South India, and it focuses on dynamism and powerful footworks, which includes leaps and whirls, which adds beauty and paints a very vibrant picture together with their decorative attire. This expression of art and culture is not seen in any corner of this world in this form. It is truly an identity that is owned and so preciously guarded by our beautiful island nation, Sri Lanka.
And today's Randoli is very special to us because we'll be seeing all the Basnayak Nilames of all four Devalis join in the first Randoli today and all the Randoli processions from today itself.
And now in front of us, we see the Honorable Basnayak Nilame of the Sri Mahanatha Devala in Kandy, who is Gayan Hinkenda.
And providing protection to the Basnayak Nilame, we see guards walk on either side, clad in yellow turbans representing the color of God Natha.
That leads to the procession of Vishnu Devale, and the second Devala Perahera of the Dalada procession is the Vishnu Devala Perahera. And we now see the chief incumbent of the Vishnu Devale taking the godly ornaments of God Vishnu to be mounted on the top of the tusker who will be carrying those today.
And the godly ornaments will be placed on this tusker clad in blue, who will take the streets of this first Randoli procession.
When it comes to the Perahera of the Vishnu Devale, one can say that those who take part in this segment are mostly clad in blue, since this is the color associated with God Vishnu. And also there are additional elements that we can see in this Devala Perahera. Talking about the flags, I think Rajiv can add more to that.
Indeed. So as rightly mentioned, the Vishnu Devala procession takes a turn when it comes to the culture it portrays. Different to the Buddhist flag bearers carried in the Natha Devala procession, here we see provincial flags bearing a variety of symbols representing the zonal and provincial areas under the Kandy kingdom.
And also the vehicle of God Vishnu is considered to be Gurula, which is a mythical bird. I think we can see the symbolism of this bird Gurula, which is represented through these flags as well.
And now we see the very first elephant of the Sri Mahavishnu Devalaya, on whose mount we can see an official carrying the flag of the Satara Koralaya. And this elephant is Haritha, who belongs to Mr. Tusitha Ranavaka of Deniyaya.
In this
Nilesh.
beautiful moonlit light, now we see the first, in fact the only heavy troop of the Vishnu Devala procession. And this is official heavy troop of the Vishnu Devalaya.
Yes, Rajiv, I think this heavy troop is also signaling us about the impending approach of the Vishnu Devala procession.
Indeed, and similar to other heavy troops, this heavy troop too consists 4 out of the 5 Panchatura Banda, which are the Daula, the large cylindrical drum you see right now, the Thammatama, which is a 2-faced kettle drum, the Talamputa, also known as the cymbal, and this is used to keep the beat of the Perahera, followed by the Horanava, the traditional Sri Lankan horn that emanates the unique sound of the heavy troop. Drummers again, clad in their original attire throughout the Perahera, take a very slow tempo, accompanied by the tunes of the Gajagavannama on the horns or the Horanava.
When all these elements are taken together, we could say that the Perahera is an elaborate religious as well as a cultural parade, which is making its way through Kandy's ancient streets.
The traditional Sinhalese orchestra has 3 types of drums associated, namely Atata, Vitata and Vitatata. And the drum you see, the Daula, is classified under the Vitatata group, meaning playing the drum using both the hand and the stick. And in contrast, the Thammatama falls into the classification of Vitata, meaning playing the drum using sticks.
And now we see the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahavishnu Devalaya, and the elephant is Muthu, who belongs to Venerable Murundeniya Dhammaratana Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Muthiyangana Rajamahawihara in Badulla.
Clad in blue, we see the sovereign dancers in the Vishnu Devala procession.
The continuous rise and fall of these fans is a gentle and joyful sight to the people who are triggered towards wholesome and devotional thoughts as they witness this procession.
Even though we see in different Devale Peraharas as well as in the Dalada procession as well, even though we see Savaram dancing, Savaram performances, I think the formation as well as the performances are slightly different. Like they are different from one to another, I guess. Because in the previous Devale Perahera, we didn't see a performance like this because they changed their styles and the performances according to the segment they are in. That's what we can presume, I guess.
Indeed, as they make use of the space in the streets with these graceful movements, one would recognize the gradual increase in the pace of these dancing styles.
And following these young dancers, we see a group of two young tuskers. On one side, we see Mihin Raja belonging to the Palatuwa Rajamahaviharaya in Matara, alongside with Rohan Raja belonging to the Kasagala Rajamahaviharaya in Veerakatiya.
Coming to our side now are the Udaki players.
As mentioned before, the Udakya is an instrument that provides the steady beat to the Kavikara Madhura or the chanting group. And as it was employed as an item of dancing in the Perahera, special dancing patterns were created with the support for playing and dancing using the narrow drum. And what you see now is a typical movement of the Udaki dance, which is the waving or the swirling of the tassel. The Udarata, Sabaragamu and Pahatarata cultures use the Udakya. However, only in the Udarata culture it is represented as a dance act.
And now we see Tikiri belonging to Mr. Jagat Vitana of Matugama, alongside with Banda belonging to Mr. Sisira Samarakon of Polgahavela.
And for the first time in today's Randoli Perahera, we see, I think that's the second time in fact. For the second time in today's Randoli Perahera, we see a group of Nayandi dancers in the Devale Peraheras, because this is a segment which we don't usually see when it comes to the Dalada procession. In fact, the procession of Sri Dalada Malikavu.
Again, we see the Nayandi dancers perform the Narumatrava. In preparation for their dance act. And it has to be specially mentioned that the West dancing troops and the Nayandi dancing troops do not perform the total collection of their dancing moves in this procession. They only perform certain dancing patterns representing the respect and veneration they have for the godly ornaments and the sacred tooth relic that takes part in this procession.
And now, followed by these Nayandi dancers, we see three young participants. On one side, we have Pillumale and Gamunu Kandula from the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage, alongside with Sanju, who belongs to Mr. Jagat Vitana of Matugama.
And I think this is the first trio of elephants that we see in the Vishnu Devali procession, and it is a very pleasing sight to witness.
Exactly, Sachini. And it has to be mentioned that the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage is providing some of their elephants for the Kandy Esala Perahera for the fourth consecutive time since 2017.
And that leads to the group of Pantheru dancers in the Vishnu Devali Perahera segment.
The Pantheru dance, which is a dance act performed using circular brass instruments with small cymbals attached to it, gives a very subtle metal sound. And this instrument was originally used to keep the beat of the chamber of versifiers. And since the 18th century, the Pantheru was used to develop a semi-classical dance form which evolved to what it is today.
Robed in gleaming yellow, gleaming blue, in fact, which is the color of God Vishnu. We are about to see another elephant trio.
In fact, the trio of these ladies have been taking part in the Vishnu Devala procession for a long period of time. On one side, we have None belonging to Mr. Sarath Jayalat of Kurunagala. We have Mali in the middle, who belongs to Mr. Chatura Vikramanayaka of Horana. And on the corner, we have Muthu belonging to Mr. Indika Mudunkot of Manikinna.
I think on their tops we can see cobra-headed canopies as well as regular brass canopies which symbolize the protection provided to the godly ornaments.
And now we see the first West dancing troupe of the Vishnu Devala procession. The drummers in the middle performs in two groups. While one group plays the main beat, the other group improvises on intricate patterns of beats, thus creating a rhythmic pattern that simulates these dancers. Again dancing to the tune of the Gajaga Vannama. We see these West dancers perform salutary gestures known as Vandummat or Dakummat, welcoming the godly ornaments of God Vishnu.
Now we see the incumbent, the chief incumbent of Sri Mahavishnu Devala in Kandy, leading the way for the main elephant group in the Vishnu Devali procession. And now we see the moment in which the godly ornaments are being carried by the beautifully adorned elephant.
And the ceremonial elephant of the Sri Mahavishnu Devala procession in this evening is Suranimala, belonging to the Alutnuvara Dadimunda Devalaya. And accompanying Suranimala, we have Sita, belonging to Mrs. Nilanthi Veerasinghe of Mirigama, and Vasana, belonging to Mrs. Krishanti Alapata of Ratnapura.
And this is the second trip of West dancers that we see in the Vishnu Devalaya Perahera.
The attire worn by the West dancers is very much unique to Kandian heritage.
And now, escorted by these majestic West dancers, we see the Basnayaka Nilame of the Alavatugoda Saman Devalaya, Honorable Jayampati Hinkenda, who is representing the Basnayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahavishnu Devalaya.
The third Devalaya procession in the Dalada procession is the Katharagama Devalaya procession. And we are about to see the moment in which the chief incumbent of Sri Mahakatharagama Devalaya Kandy is taking the godly ornaments to be placed on the mount of the royal elephant, who would be taking these ornaments today in the first Randoli Perahera.
And leading the Katharagama Devala procession, we see a group of Buddhist flag bearers.
And not only the Buddhist flag but also the provincial flags are carried in the Katharagama Devalaya procession. At the same time, it is to be noted that the color worn by most of the participants in this segment is red, and we can see the vehicle of god Katharagama, which is the peacock, in most of these flags as well.
Indeed, and speaking of the color, it is very much characteristic of god Katharagama, since many Hindus revere god Katharagama as a very strong and powerful god. And Sri Lanka's literary history consists of a great array of stories and folklore associated with god Katharagama, amongst other gods that are worshipped. And given so, the majority of Sri Lankans widely worship god Katharagama.
And this is the first trip of Hevisi beaters in the Katharagama Devalaya procession.
And followed by the Hevisi troop, we see the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahakatharagama Devalaya, who is on the mount of Manike, belonging to Mr. Anura Kempitiya of Kegol. It must be mentioned that Manike has been leading the Sri Mahakatharagama Devala procession for the past consecutive 6 years.
And now we see a very vibrant group of castanet players. These dancers, instrument players, and all other people who are part of this procession engage in this spectacular event for a number of days at a stretch. They do it out of pure respect and honor for the sacred tooth relic and the gods and goddesses. Despite the situation of the country and despite the rain that does not tone down or reduce the veneration and the respect they have for these godly ornaments and the sacred tooth relic.
And now we see a group of wooden stick dancers in the Kataragama Devale procession. The Likeli or wooden stick dance is an instantly recognizable cultural icon of the Kandian kingdom. It depicts the traditional martial art of Angampora, and especially when it comes to the Perahera of Kataragama Devale, we can say that this element is included, this element is incorporated into it because God Kataragama is considered a warrior god, and this dance form itself is a very vibrant and a vigorous form of dance which would relate to the nature of God Kataragama as well.
These young dancers, either knowingly or unknowingly, are engaged in the great Angampura tradition of the Hela martial warriors. And that in fact gives us a sense of respect and pride for our ancient martial artists for protecting our island nation from the invaders throughout the years. Providing the steady beat and the tunes for these Likeli dancers or the wooden stick dancers are 3 Gatabera players and flutes. And what you see behind the flutes is a children's drum known as the Danduberea, made out of bamboo. And this again is a folk instrument used in ancient Sri Lanka.
And next, we see the duo of elephants belonging to Venerable Bengamue Dhammadinna Thero, the chief incumbent of the historic Palmadulla Rajamaha Vihara, and the names of these 2 elephants can be termed as Chula and Ratna. The meaning of the word Ratna in Sinhalese means gem, and Ratna, representing the village of Ratnapura that is famous for gems, is indeed a resemblance of his hometown. And the word Chula means small, meaning that he is the smaller elephant of the troop of elephants of the Palmadulla temple.
And we see the Odaki players in the Kataragama Devale procession join in today's Randoli Perahera.
The Odakya has many interesting folk stories attached to it. It is believed that the drum was gifted to the people by the gods. It is said to have been constructed according to the instructions of god Sakra, while the skins of the 2 faces of the drum and the very unique sound was given by the gods Ishvara and god Vishnu respectively. And as we see, the costume worn by the Odaki players is again the traditional costume and is similar to the costume worn by the Panteru dancers.
And following these Udaki players, we can see Kadira, belonging to the Vipashyarama temple in Maharagama. The name Kadira is in fact a name that is given to call god Kataragama according to our Sinhalese literature. It is fascinating to see how Kadira has joined the Sri Maha Kataragama Devala Perahera this year, whereas he was a participant of the Natha and Pattini Devala processions in the previous years.
As Kadira coincidentally joins the Kataragama Devali processions this year, we see a familiar, a headfast beat which is usually and regularly associated with god Kataragama and the Kataragama Devali procession.
Indeed, this section of the Kataragama Devala procession takes us somewhat away from the traditional dance forms and culture that we witnessed throughout this procession.
Since the procession is dedicated to god Kataragama, peacock dancing is a very special feature in this Perahera segment, which is followed by this fast beat. The peacock is considered the vehicle of god Kataragama. That is why these performers are playing in this Perahera.
And as we see, the instruments used in this procession is also very different to what we saw or witnessed before.
And that elephant we noticed was Sankaraja, belonging to the historic Sankapala Rajamahaviharaya of Amilipitiya.
And this is one of the most awaited segments when it comes to the Kataragama Devale procession. I think a segment which is looked forward to by many people.
Indeed, and as you rightly mentioned before, the gradual increase in the pace of the beats and tunes in the Devala Peraharas was to enter this dance form of fast and strong Kavadi beats.
These performers perform in great dedication and in great veneration to god Kataragama.
And although this dance form does not have controlled dance steps and hand gestures, which is very much in contrast to what we witnessed before, this effortless dancing is a form of offering and veneration to god Kataragama.
And this elephant we see is Panduka, belonging to the historic Ganevatta Purana Kataragama Devalaya in Piliyandala, and is under the responsibility of Mr. Chandana Katriarachi. And on the mount of Panduka we see a snake head canopy, which is to symbolize protection to the upcoming godly ornaments of god Kataragama.
And now marking a sharp turn back into the rich Kandian heritage, we see yet another West dancing troupe performing the Narumatrava. This silver headgear characterizes the West dancer. From the conical top of the headdress spreads 7 spokes that looks like rays, or sometimes similar to flames or even leaves. And from the 7 corners of these rays dangles little shining trinklets.
And we see the rhythms and beats, drum beats that are usually associated with the South Indian culture. This is Nagasingham performance, which could be exclusively seen when it comes to the procession of Kataragama Devale. And these Nagasingham players lead to the most awaited moment in the Kataragama Devale, And now we see the chief incumbent of Kataragama Devalaya dressed in traditional South Indian robes.
And followed by the chief Iyer of the Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya, we see the ceremonial tusker of the Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya, who is Rama, belonging to Mr. Tudor Gunasekara of Heyanthudua. And Rama is accompanied by Aruna, belonging to Venerable Higgoda Saddhananda Thero of the Handala Rajamaha Viharaya, and Esala, belonging to Venerable Katugastara Sharada Thero of the Pirisyala Senanayaka Pirivena.
And following the trio of elephants is yet another group of West dancers. Following on with the attire of the Kandian dancers, they also wear mango-shaped ornaments for the ears and cobra-shaped sheaths over the arms. And as the West dancer wheels and whirls the long ribbon suspended from his elaborate crown-like headgear, they make the most energetic flicking movement. And this West costume is not just stored anywhere, but this is considered sacred. It is usually placed in a separate shrine room or at the village temple in ancient times.
And this dancing tradition is not a simple one in its nature. I think, as I have heard, the West dancers have to fulfill certain tasks, as well as they have to master a great number of skills in order to be a perfectly skilled West dancer. I think when it comes to the Kandy Esala Perahera, all these West dancers are of such nature.
Indeed, according to upcountry dancing traditions, Pa Salamba, Goda Salamba, Vannam, Shastriya dancers in the Kohobakankariya, Hatpada and Avandum are dancers that have to be skillfully learnt before being adorned with the West Attua.
And welcomed by these West dancers is the Basnayaka Nilame of the Sri Maha Kataragama Devalaya in Kandy. And this is Honorable Basnayaka Nilame Gamunu Bandara Walisundara.
And making its way to the final Devala procession, we are witnessing pictures from the Pattini Devalaya. And as we hear the Magubera, followed by Alatipada, by the Daula and the Thammattaba, we now witness the Alati Amma perform blessings with a lamp.
The Buddhist flags are being carried in every Devalaya Perahera segment as well, to remind the people of the importance of this entire grand procession as a Buddhist procession. And in the Pattini Devalaya Perahera segment too, we see the Buddhist flag bearers.
Folklore stated that Goddess Pattini was a great model who preserved her chastity, and due to this great and noble quality, she could obtain the highest veneration of noble beings.
And now we'll hear yet another familiar tune that we were able to hear previously as well. And the tune's stately grandeur emits an unmistakably elephantine vibe. And this is the Hevasi troop of the Pattini Devalaya procession, signaling us of the approach of the procession.
as we enjoy all these different dances in the sacred streets of Kandy, we happen to think what actually helped us preserve this beautiful culture. The answer to this lies in the strong link that is to this date established between art, culture, literature and the Buddhist temples. All these spring out from the same string of sources and therefore are intertwined.
After 5 days of accompanying the ceremonial elephant, we see Bandara belonging to Mr. Kitsiri Kahatapitiya of Horana carrying the Gajanayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahapattini Devalaya on this first Randoli Perahera.
The color of Goddess Pattini is yellow, and in this Perahera segment we can see that the representatives or the performers of this Perahera would be wearing the color yellow to represent the goddess's color.
And this is a female Pantheru troupe. And as mentioned before, this is the first female dancing item that we witness in this first Randoli procession.
And Rajiv, the only female representation at the Dalada procession is the Pattini Devala Perahera. And I think the Panthera, this instrument is very much significant when it comes to the character of Goddess Pattini.
Speaking of which, the Pantheru is believed to have the design of the anklets which you just witnessed, the anklets of Goddess Pattini. Therefore, this dance is very much symbolic and is in very close relation to Goddess Pattini.
And next we have a duo of elephants representing the Sri Mahapattini Devala procession. And these two elephants are Tharindu belonging to Venerable Kobawaka Dhamminda Thero, the chief incumbent of the Kirivihara Rajamaha Vihara in Kataragama, and Raja belonging to Mr. Asanka Vijay Singha of Balangoda.
And now we see a very special dancing item. In fact, this is the first instance where we see this dancing item in the Dalada procession this year. This is the Patru dance. And this is the first time we see it in the Devali Perahera segments as well. The Patru dance or the splinter dance is a dance to the rhythm of the verses sung and to the tune of the drums played. And very vibrant young individuals perform this dance. Movements of hands and feet are done in a certain pattern to attract the viewers.
With a series of whirls and twirls, this again symbolizes and reflects the gradual increase in energy and pace as we proceed through the Devala Peraharas.
We see another representation from the Pinnavala Elephant Orphanage, and this is Gagana. And Gagana is not alone in the procession today. He is accompanied with Kumari, who belongs to Mr. Asanka Vijay Singha of Balangoda.
And on their mounts we see canopies and a cobra-headed canopy as well, symbolizing the protection provided to the godly animals.
And now we witness the female counterpart of the West dancing art, which is the female West dancing group. The beauty of the Pattini Devala procession is indeed magnified with the joining of these beautiful female dancers, adorned in vibrant colored attire and head accessories, similar, however, symbolically similar to the West dancing groups. In fact, the long tassel that falls from their headgear is one similarity we see to the West dancing costume.
And it is to be mentioned that this different vibe the young female dancers bring to the Pattini Devali procession is truly admirable.
Indeed, Sachini. So is the representation of female elephants which we see in the Sri Mahapattini Devalaya. Just like Manike we see in these pictures who belong to Mrs. Shriyani Gunawardana of Dung Ovita.
Thus we see the first West dancing troupe in the Pattini Devali procession. It could be said that when it comes to all segments of the Dalada procession, these West dances are used in occasions where they are supposed to herald the arrival of distinguished individuals or to welcome those distinguished individuals with their chants and dancing forms.
The West dance has three main schools, namely the Kandian school, the Satarakora school, and the Satkora school. And all the dancers performing in this Perahera, including this, is from the Kandian school.
And this is the chief incumbent of the Pattini Devali, heralded by the first West dancing troupe led by Mithun Bhandar.
Again, this ensemble of West dancers dances to a very slow tempo, performing salutary gestures to the impending godly ornaments of goddess Pattini.
Just like the 13 years we saw before, this is Mangala, belonging to the most venerable Mahanayaka Thero of the Sri Lanka Ramana Nikaya, under the responsibility of Mr. Udara Galapati carrying the godly ornaments. And accompanying Mangala, we saw Bandara belonging to Ms. Kitsirika Hatapitiya and Rani belonging to Mr. Richard Gonakumbura.
And this is in fact the last West dancing troupe and the overall last dancing item that we would witness on this first Randoli Perahera.
All these dancing traditions are accompanied by beautiful chants, and we can see the second troupe of West dancers, and as Rajiv mentioned, the final performers of today's Randoli Perahera are about to welcome another great individual in the Pattini Devali procession.
This procession tells the story of Sri Lanka, as it is the very embodiment of our culture and values, which makes it stand out amongst the diversity of the world.
And escorted by these Swiss dancers, we see the Basnayaka Nilame of the Sri Mahapattini Devalaya, Honorable Hemantha Bandarahera.
As the Basanayakanilame of Pattini Devale, guarded by these guards, leave our sight, we are about to see the most important segment in Randoli procession, which is significant to the Randoli processions alone. The palanquins or Randoli being carried after the processions. And we see the palanquins of Natha Devale in yellow, the palanquin of Vishnu Devale in blue, the palanquin that belongs to the Kataragama Devale in red, and finally the palanquin that belongs to the Pattini Devale once again in yellow color. And that is why this procession is called Randoli.
And what you just witnessed was the conclusion of the first Randoli Perahera.
Let there be timely rains that will bring life-giving water to our fields and ensure a bountiful harvest.
May our country prosper. Dalanda Samindu Pitai.